You are listening to the Enormocast.
High-performance climbing apparel that looks so cool on your Instagram can look notoriously out of place when you're back in real life amongst the civvies in the valley below. Just so you know, while you're waiting in line for your frothy mochaccino, bright orange pants pretty much say, "I just escaped from prison." Enter Black Diamond's new forged denim pants. The Cordura blended denim stretches when you need it, fends off sharp crystals and rough rock, and looks great back at work, with just enough chalk dust to let other climbers in the office know that you were training at lunch, you sick bird. So if you want to feel good, look good on the rock and when mingling with lowlanders, like an undercover climbing super agent, then go to blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop and rub up against a pair of forged denim pants from Black Diamond. Black Diamond is a proud sponsor of the Enormocast.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah, the
big
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000
seats.
We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in Colorado on June 14th, 2019. And this is episode 177 of the Enormocast, a conversation with boulderer, sport climber, and comp climber, Allison Vest. So I was excited to get a show done with Allison. Allison is a sort of newly sponsored Black Diamond athlete, so I had a kind of inroad with her, and I'm always looking to have more women on the show, as well as talk to some comp climbers, because I don't talk to comp climbers very often. I don't know how to talk to them. I got to figure it out every single time. Much more intimidating than talking to legends like Peter Croft and whatnot, for me, just out of my wheelhouse. So that was cool. Also, she's Canadian, always good to have more Canadians on the show, although she was born in Minnesota. So I think we can kind of claim her as well. So I took a trip up to Salt Lake to get this one done. Black Diamond was having their athlete summit, a bunch of awesome athletes getting together, but it turns out I'd actually interviewed most of those people already over the years, even before they were with Black Diamond. So I wanted to sit down with Allison, and, Black Diamond was cool. They're like, come on up, let's do this. And then they tried to stick me in the basement, in a room with a bunch of wires sticking out of the walls and people clomping around above and literally a bunch of servers next door just like humming away. And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So we sort of tromped around and couldn't really find any place where there wasn't a bunch of manic work going on. So I ended up sitting outside on a picnic table in the parking lot, which proved to be a little bit challenging because even though there's a lot of productivity going on inside, people just come and go from their jobs at Black Diamond, like whatever, lunch, before lunch, after lunch, walking their dog, getting their bike ready, all these sorts of things. So anyway, there's a bit of background noise in this one, nothing to worry about really. But what I realized too is that the bane of all podcasters' existences, whether you're inside or not, if you're in an urban setting or even just like a town somewhere, are garbage trucks. Because if you're not in like a fully soundproof studio, and granted, I was outside, but even at home sometimes I get the frickin' garbage truck goes by, and then of course they back up, and it's like beep, beep, beep. And of course, Miles, the Enormo baby, loves it, but it's a pain in the ass for recording things. And they're everywhere. You don't realize how garbage trucks are just crawling all over your town every day, 24 hours a day, until you start to try to record something. So listen for the beep, beep, beep of the garbage truck. Also, we had a little wind on the mics, but barely any, just a couple spots. Yes, the podcaster making excuses for his sound production. Not cliche at all. Okay, let me tell you about Allison. Allison is, again, Canadian boulder, Canadian comp climber. She was the bouldering national champion in 2018. And this is cool, she literally left just moments after doing this interview to go to the Canadian Nationals for lead climbing, and she won. So there you go. A normal bump in effect. I mean, it has to be, right? Directly there, and she wins. You guys can decide. The normal bump is either a boost or it's fatal. It's just that black and white. So right on. Let's get to it. I'm rushing off to go climbing this weekend. Got to get going. Got to get out of here. Got to go pack. So get to go climbing. A weekend warrior, full effect. Hope you guys are too. And let's get to the interview with Allison Vest.
Sportiva pretty much invented the downturned shoe with the introduction of the Testarossa ages ago.
Too radical, cried the olds. That looks like it hurts, cried the fearful.
Ooh, me likey, whispered a prepubescent Jonathan Segrist. And guess who went on to set the climbing world on fire in his testes? Hint, it wasn't Grandpa Flatfoot waving his hexes around and mumbling gear beta at a stump. And soon every company followed suit and steep climbs opened up to the masses. Now Sportiva took the venerable Testarossa and under the direction of some of the best climbers in the world, did a redesign. The new Testarossa sports better heel hooking security and the famous P3 tech to help retain that downturn fit. So check out how the radical just got more radicaler at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Sportiva is a proud sponsor of the Enormocast.
So where are you based out of?
Right now, I'm based out of Vancouver, BC.
Okay.
So the cousin of Squamish.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're Canadian.
I am Canadian. I was born in the U.S. I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay.
And then my family moved to Canmore, Alberta, when I was 8.
Really?
My dad got a job working in wildlife conservation. So I grew up in the Rockies in Canmore, and then headed out west to go to university. Actually just graduated in April.
So Canmore strikes me, I've spent a lot of time there, and it strikes me as one of those towns that no one is from. But here you are.
Yeah, here I am. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm enjoying living in the city right now just because Canmore, as amazing as it is for, rock and mountain sports and getting outside, it is a bit of a bubble culturally. So I'm really enjoying actually living in Vancouver and having that diversity in culture and arts and a lot more going on. But I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. It's an incredible place to grow up, Canmore. Yeah, lots going on, people all over the place, psyched to get out and do, a plethora of mountain activities.
Right. So was that part of your upbringing then in terms of climbing and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just talking to Sonny Trotter earlier because he lives there now with his family and he's trying to raise kids there. So it was interesting to talk to him as somebody who had been raised in that environment. Like it definitely motivated me as a high performance athlete. Canmore has one of the highest proportion of, so in Canmore, you're constantly just passing Olympians on the trail, or I used to babysit for a Olympic gold medal skier, and it's really motivating in that sense of high performance sport. So it seems like there's sort of two avenues that people who grow up in Canmore take. They either become high performance athletes doing whatever they're doing, or they're out, doing the most extreme things in the mountain. It's sort of one way or the other. Yeah, no one's in the middle. It's very elitist.
Mediocre people.
Yeah.
Beat it.
It's really hard to do like recreational sport there. You'll be like, I'll try cross country skiing today, and then you'll get passed by somebody who's in a sit ski without legs. Like that's, sort of the culture in Canmore is definitely it's a little bit elitist, but it's more just high performance, and people are really pushing the limits there, almost on a daily basis. So it's an inspiring place to grow up.
And so let's go through a little bit of what got you into climbing then, and then. That's a pretty typical place to start here.
Yeah.
And then the crossover too to making it super serious.
Yeah. So I when I was 4 or 5 years old, I think, in preschool, I would be climbing on the outside of the jungle gym and come home with my hands bleeding, and my parents would have to send me to preschool with my hands taped. And so eventually they were just, God, I got to find something to do with this kid, get an outlet for this energy. And so I think my dad just, quick Google search for climbing gym and started doing some summer camps and birthday parties in Minnesota, actually. Yeah. And then when we moved to Canmore, got connected with the local climbing gym there. And, and I think the youth coach there saw I was psyched and invited me to join the youth team when I was about 9 or so. And I quit for 1 year when I was 14 and decided I wanted to become a dancer.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, super reasonable. Apparently it's not reasonable to become a dancer starting at 14.
Right.
So that was
you're already a little over the hill.
Quick slip slap in the face.
So what kind of
a reality
check? Ballet?
Well, a little bit of ballet, a little bit of hip hop, some musical theater action, and then I was over it.
Okay.
And came running back
to climbing.
Yeah.
It seemed like too late and too big a hill to climb.
Yeah. I think climbing was always where my heart was at. But
how are your dance chops these days?
Ooh, yeah. I like to keep those a bit under wraps.
Oh,
maybe,
really?
Yeah. They come busting out when you least expect it, but
Okay.
a bit of a confidential situation there for sure.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
What is it that made your family move to Canmore? That's kind of a curious move.
It is a curious move. So
Minnesota.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, my dad, when he was maybe late teens, early 20s, hitchhiked from where he's from in Wisconsin. He hitchhiked all the way to Banff, Alberta, to downhill ski. He was big into downhill skiing, and he was there when he was a young 20-something-year-old and loved it and fell in love with the mountains and the energy there. And I think he sort of always wanted to go back. And he grew up and ended up getting really into conservation. And he sort of got his dream job working in the parks, trying to connect the wildlife corridors from Yellowstone National Park all the way up to the Yukon. And it was what he had always wanted to do, based out of Canmore, where he always wanted to live. And so my parents decided to make the move, and the plan was to stay for a year, and, we're still here. So, yeah, they still live there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you moved over to the West Coast to go to university.
I did.
And was that like, I got into the school, or was it more of like a conscious move get away from the little town a little bit?
Again, I kind of skirted over one small detail.
Oh, okay.
I went to my first year of university in Edmonton, Alberta, which is in northern Alberta, sort of in the prairies.
Sure.
And it was fine, but it was a little bit suffocating. I felt like it was hard to get out. There's really no mountains around, and going from a place like Canmore, where you're just, you wake up every morning and get to look at these staggeringly beautiful snow-covered peaks, to being right in the middle of a city with sort of no escape, was a bit of a shock. So I went there for 1 year, and then I took a year off and just bummed around and did some climbing.
Plus, like, Canmore's kind of downright balmy, probably.
Yeah, no, it was Edmonton. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to hate on Edmonton. I don't want to get, angry emails written.
No, don't worry. If there's any climbers,
the Edmonton climbers.
Well, if there's any climbers that live in Edmonton who listen to this, which I know there are actually, quite frankly, they'd be like, one of these days I want to move to Canmore. So
it's totally
it's okay to lament where you live in terms of climbing, because
But anyway, I had a hard time there, so I took a year off, and then
so that was more of an issue of like, that was a school. It just worked. It seemed like it worked on paper or something.
Yeah. Well, I had a full scholarship to that school too. So it was
for what?
It was just an academic scholarship from my high school years.
Right.
So that was also a motivator. Obviously, school's expensive, but I also don't think I was quite ready to go. Like, I didn't really know. I was really caught up in not knowing what I wanted to do with my life and where I wanted to go, and so I sort of just went to Edmonton for the heck of it, and that was Edmonton's definitely not a place to just go for the heck of it. People there, you sort of need a little bit of direction if you want to make it living in Edmonton.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've thought about, when I went to college out of high school, it was an escape from Illinois, and I wanted to go to Colorado, and it was a way to get to Colorado. But since then, and knowing a lot of people, it just, this whole like gap year idea that I think is pretty big and popular in Europe. I think it can be wasted, but it's also maybe a good opportunity for certain people.
Absolutely. I think it's super important. I sort of took a gap year.
Yeah, so you took a gap year. What were you up to?
I actually went on a climbing trip for 3 months to Southeast Asia. So I was saving up, working for that. And then we went to China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand type situation. And it was sort of a horrible trip. I wish I had an interesting story for you.
I mean, but horrible is interesting.
It was very interesting. It's a very interesting story. It was terrible. Everything went wrong. It was not enjoyable. I came home and was like, okay, now I need a vacation. Like it was.
Is it terrible went wrong? You can tell us about it?
Oh yeah. Well, I got, man. Just
right, so hold on.
Whoa,
I'm going to come back
to some direction here. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to your horrible story.
All right.
Because horrible is super interesting.
Okay.
Success is actually way more boring than horrible. But let me frame you as a climber at this point.
Okay.
Climbing in Canmore, were you in the gym and outdoors? What kind of climber were you? Is a kind of a classic Enormocast question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in Canmore. Another thing that happens a lot in Canmore is it's a lot of families with a lot of money who can afford to pay for their kids to do this and that and compete in this sport and compete in that sport and do all these different things. And, I had a lot of support from my parents, but, you only have so much funding as your family can provide. So for a lot of my older years, I was mostly only in the gym, which seems a little bit counterintuitive because you're in Canmore around some of the most incredible rock in the world. But I'm a very competitive person, and that's sort of where I wanted all of my energy to be focused, was to be successful competing in Canada and internationally. And I was always doing well in Canada, but never the best of the best. I wasn't winning every competition I entered. I would come, I'd win, and then I'd come third, and then I would come second, and then fifth. And then so it was sort of all over the place. And while that was a little bit demoralizing at the time, I think it's what's kept me around for so long, sort of hungry for that breakthrough moment. But it was hard to afford to do competitions if your family didn't necessarily have the funding for it. So most of my time in Canmore was working and then training and sort of doing the two of those things back to back and trying to make it work so that I could get to the competitions that I was so desperate to do well at.
Well, I mean, again, we're talking about this town, all these mountain sports, but having spent some time there, it's got a pretty short outdoor climbing season. Is one thing. I don't remember, and this was 15 years ago, the bouldering scene there, the outdoor bouldering scene. The limestone blocks. They are either not there or they're not conducive. So, I mean, it does have its some limitations in terms of climbing outdoors as well. It's more of like a go out and there's sport climbing, but then the big routes are scary and involved. And you kind of can't do both if you want to be good at one.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people are gung ho in Canmore. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it'll be nice for half a second and people will be rushing outside to get on the, if I'm fully honest with you, I'm a fairly fair weather climber as far as it goes. I'm not into so I'm not a sufferfest climber for sure, but I think I remember one time when I was about 18, I went climbing with a couple of guys that I trained with at the gym, and they were super psyched to go. And we woke up the morning, we were ready to go climbing, and it had just snowed like 3 feet of like there was so much snow on the ground, and they were like, "We're going. Doesn't matter. We're going." So I was like, I was like, all right, well. Okay, so I went with them, and I was halfway up. I was like, halfway up some sport climb, and I start looking at the rock, and there's just blood all over the rock. And I remember thinking, where is this coming from? And I realized I couldn't feel my hands, and I looked down, and my entire palm was gone. Like, it was just like one huge. And I looked down at my hand, and I, yelled at this dude to lower me. And he was like, "No, come on, you got it." And I was like, "No, you need to bring me down right now." And I got down, and I had to hold a sock, because we didn't have any first aid because we were 18. And so I just held my sock and walked out so my hand would stop bleeding. And I remember actively thinking, I will never again.
Well, you're just thinking too, like,
never again am I doing
how's
this.
my training schedule now that I got this giant scab on my palm? Like, how's my sloper training going to go?
Exactly. Most of the time I end up thinking, if I hurt myself doing something probably kind of stupid and then I can't train and I can't do that next competition, I would never forgive myself. So it's a sort of intense mentality, but...
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're going to be good at it, you got to be focused, and you've got, just like you're dancing. I mean, really, you've got this window in terms of age and body and everything else that this is the time. And I mean, you really honestly, if you want to become some sort of outdoor, rad outdoor climber, you've got a lot more space, I think, later for that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this week we're here at this summit, but there's a few of us who are trying to train for competitions through it. And this morning, Sean Bailey and I got up I think my alarm went off at 5:30 so we could get to the gym at 6 to train before all the meetings started. And I was kicking Sean Bailey's bed, trying to get him out of bed. And eventually we stumbled our way into the gym. And a bunch of the other guys on the team were like, damn, you guys are motivated. And I think I just turned to him and I said, it's not really motivation anymore. It's sort of an obsessive compulsive thing. Sometimes you don't wake up wanting to go to train. It's just it's what you need to do. And so it's sort of this, this neurotic compulsion that gets you to the gym, not necessarily motivation. I mean, some days it's motivation, but other days it's, you got to do what you got to do and you got to make the time, even if it's at 5:30 in the morning.
Well, that I think would be the thing that divides you from all of the rest of us, is that I would just stay in bed. I mean, it's simple. Among other things, but in terms of that, motivation is, I think, only, fills in some of the gaps. You have to make it this routine if you're going to be good enough. Is there something right on the horizon here that you're training for at this moment?
So I leave tomorrow for the Canadian Lead Nationals.
Oh, okay.
So I'm ducking out a bit early from here to head to Montreal for Lead Nationals. Yeah.
Okay. So that's your climbing world. It at the moment is roughly indoor climbing training for competitions. And you just said the lead comp. Is that your main discipline, or are you
I actually prefer bouldering.
Okay, you are bold. That's what I thought. But
yeah, but I do like lead. It's sort of hard with the seasons crossing. I'm basically heading to Lead Nationals in bouldering shape because it's in the middle of the IFSC Bouldering World Cup. It just sort of schedules didn't totally work out, ended up that way.
Compression sleeves.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just climb really fast.
Right.
Yeah. Just going to go see what happens, I guess. But it's kind of a nice way to go into a competition, not having trained for months for it. It's hard to put 8 months of grueling effort into something and have the result be dependent on one boulder or 5 boulders or 5 minutes. It's vulnerable to put yourself out on the line like that. So it's sort of a relief to be going into a lead competition in bouldering shape because, almost like nothing to lose. Doesn't have the same pressure as it does when you train really hard for something. So.
Okay. Well, that's now. So we skipped up to now, but I want to go back to your horrible trip. So we framed you as this climber, indoors, out, mostly indoors, a little bit outdoor climbing, but Canada not conducive to warm, fun, sunny outdoor climbing as much.
Man, I
can
was
be done,
ready.
Can be found.
Whew.
So you go on a climbing trip, and it sounds like maybe your first big sort of. Well, sounds like probably your first international thing.
Yeah,
maybe your first big kind of road trip at all.
Yeah, so I'd been to Asia once before for Youth Worlds.
Okay.
But we were with chaperones, and we were like 15, and other people did everything for us. So
what country was that in?
We went to Thailand for a week, and then after that week in Thailand, we went to Singapore for the Youth World Championships. Yeah. But it's a bit of a different situation when you're 18 or 19 and out there all on your own.
Right.
So it was me and a friend of mine that I had grown up, Amy, that I had grown up with sort of in the youth world, also 18 or 19. And it was sort of her dream. She sort of had picked out all these destinations that were famous for climbing in Southeast Asia and invited me to come with her. And I had just survived my year in Edmonton, Alberta, the Great White North, -40 winter. And I was like, rearing to get out of there. So I was, pretty psyched. But yeah, the stuff just started going wrong for us. Like right from the get-go, we got there. One of our bags was just left in Vancouver for a week. So we didn't have any of our climbing stuff. And we were stuck in this hostel that was like in the middle of this random rural city in China that we accidentally flew into because we booked it to the wrong place, which was a story in its own. But then we couldn't find food that wasn't like flattened street chicken on a stick, which we were like, we could eat that, but if we do, we will get sick instantly. Like that is like full 0 to 100 China food wise. That would have been bad. So we lived off Cliff Bars for like 4 days or so, which was terrible. Is one of the most. I remember just lying in our bunk beds, just like groaning, just weighing 100 pounds from. Oh man!
Are you sponsored by Cliff Bar now?
I'm not.
Okay,
I mean,
I think you just shot your sponsorship right there.
You know, I don't think I've eaten a Cliff Bar since that day, and I loved them up until then. So, then we finally got out of there to the actual climbing place, and it was just a series of one of the crags we went to. I was cleaning this like run out tufa route. It was like 12C or something. And Amy had gone up first and she hadn't gone all the way to the anchors. So the rope wasn't even all through the anchors. And this policeman comes charging up to the rock and starts yelling at us, but he doesn't speak any English. So he just starts saying, hello, 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 and pointing at the ground, telling us to get down from the climbs, because apparently it was illegal, which no one told us until we got there. We were with a pretty big group. And so we just decided not to listen to him and keep climbing. And our friend from Hong Kong told me, he looked at me and I asked, we had like 18 draws up or something. So I was like, dude, can we like go get our gear, or is he going to freak out? And he said, you can go get it, but don't do anything dramatic and don't fall. Otherwise he'll lose his shit. So we like 18, this was like super run out. I'm already like not very confident on rock. And I get to the last draw that Amy had clipped, and I decided to like clean it by down climbing, because I was pretty sure I was going to fall if I climbed past this draw. So I'm down climbing through run out tufas, and this policeman picks up a brick-sized rock and starts trying to throw it at me to get me off of this route. So I'm like down. It was like one of the most horrifying. Wow. Yeah, it was.
You're like, if I fall, I'm going to jail.
I was like, this is like, I want to go home right now. Like, I was like, sure that I want to go home. And he's just yelling at us in Mandarin, and all of our friends at that point run over and start blocking him so that he can't like hit me with this rock. We finally get down, and we ended up just running away through the bushes and like crawling under some fence to get out of there. And so that was terrible. And then we got to Vietnam, and the girl that I was with passed out in a museum and hit her face on a glass case on the way down and was bleeding out of her head. And they told us she had a heart condition, so we had to be in the hospital for like 14 days or something insane in Vietnam.
Your partner?
The girl I was
Amy.
with. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that was rad.
Did she have a heart condition?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
I didn't think so.
Nothing. But we were so sure she didn't after all of it. We got all the tests done.
Right.
And they had told us before we left that there was a slim chance we could get Japanese encephalitis, which is brain swelling that you get from mosquitoes. And we learned about it too late, so we only got the first dose of the vaccine. Yeah. And basically your brain swells until it hits the inside of your skull, and then you're basically dead before you have symptoms. So it's like super serious. But I remember I overreacted a bit because we had just been thinking about that and talking about that, and she passed out and hit the floor, and I instantly was like, that's it, she's dead. What am I going to do? She's got a Japanese encephalitis. Her brain just exploded. Like I was sure she was dead. And they like called the ambulance, loaded her into the back of this ambulance, which in Vietnam, the back of the ambulance was just empty. It was just a big empty truck. And they just load you into it. And then drive away. And they turn the lights on and the sirens, and you start moving through traffic, but it's just bumper to nobody moves.
Right,
so then the guy just gets bored and turns the lights off. And anyway, so that was a hectic one for sure. And then it was just sort of a series of stories like that. Just like one thing, it was exhausting, one thing after the other. We were there for 3 months. supposed to be on rock most of the time. We climbed for 10 days in 3 months.
Jeez.
Something like that. Because then we got to Thailand where we were for the most part of the majority of the time, and we were sick for just like just aggressively ill for like an entire week. Couldn't leave we'd like crawl out of our bungalow down to the beach to get Gatorade or something so we didn't die. But then it was time for me to go home, and I was actually leaving Amy by herself in Laos. She was staying on for another 3 months, which I will add went perfectly. As soon as I was gone, she went off without a hitch. She had a fantastic time. So word to the wise, apparently don't do climbing trips with me because things will happen.
Yeah, you're born on a bad sign.
But
here, hold on.
So I was leaving Laos, and I wake up the morning of my flight. I woke up late somehow. None of my alarms went off. So I rush to this tuk-tuk, and I pay this guy way too much money to take me to the airport. So he steps on it. We get to the airport. I think I'm there in time. I go up to the counter. I check myself in. I was supposed to have this insane flight path from Laos to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, to Beijing, to Vancouver, and then back to Calgary in Alberta. And I was supposed to have 20 hours in the Ho Chi Minh airport because that was just the way the flights worked out because they only flew out of this tiny Laotian airport like twice a week. And so I get there, and they asked me to see my Vietnamese visa, which I didn't have because I was planning on just staying in the airport for the whole 20 hours. And so I said, I don't have one. I'm not leaving the airport. And they told me the airport closes at night, so you can't actually stay in the airport because then when they kick you out of the airport and you don't have a visa, you get thrown in Vietnamese prison and you're never heard from again. So this is all going through my head, and I'm arguing with the guy. I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to get home. Like, you got to let me on this plane.
You don't know what's happened to me.
You have no idea. Like, please, I got to get out of this country. Like, I mean, I was like desperate, and I'm arguing with him, and he looks at me straight in the eyes and he goes, I just don't want you to get shot. And I was like 18 at the time. Excuse me? Like, by myself. Sorry, what? And he goes, Vietnamese immigration, not nice. And so at that point I was like, yo, okay. I mean, I was like, I don't know what to do here, guy. And he was like, all right, well, if you sign this, I'll let you on the flight. So he turns this waiver over to me that basically I had to sign it. It says if I had to pay extreme amounts of money or if anything happens to me, I won't sue the airline. So I had to sign this waiver. And so I was like, you know, I got to get home, man. So I signed this waiver, got on the flight, landed in Vietnam, and hung out in the airport until about 1 a.m. when all the lights turned off. Mm-hmm. And then I hid behind a trash can for 6 hours, sitting in this airport, terrified out of my mind, pitch black.
This is the worst climbing trip I've ever heard of in my entire life.
Behind a trash can, by myself. I was like...
waiting to get thrown in jail.
Man, I was so stressed out. And all of my friends at home luckily were awake because it was daytime in Canada, and so I was texting like, if you don't hear from me every half hour, like call the embassy, like get somebody into Vietnam, get me out of here. And anyway, finally lights came on again at like, I don't even know what time it was, right before my flight left for Beijing, and I sprinted to the gate and was like, check me in, and he scanned my boarding pass, and I remember I got onto the plane, sat down in my seat, and just sobbed. Just was like, it's the happiest moment of my life, for sure. Never been happier to land in China.
That is an awesome story.
Yeah, I mean...
anything else? I mean, shit, you're not home yet. What else happened? There must have been something else.
There was just so many things. I got bit by a dog, and I thought I had rabies for a week. We had to, like, hunt down the dog owner. Turned out...
like, through the skin, bit by a dog?
Like, I was bleeding, yeah. Huh. It wasn't that bad, but, you know, in China.
Well, the fact that the dog had an owner was a positive.
It was nice. I mean, I was, like, Googling, like, where is the closest rabies treatment in China? But, so that was fine. We couldn't book a flight at one point because all of the websites were in China. And so we had this random dude do it for us on his phone. And he gets to the website and he looks at us and he goes, passports and credit cards, please. So he just gave this, like, honestly, it was terrible. It was a terrible trip. It was super stressful. Nothing went right. It was, like, heinous, but I just learned so much about, like, how to handle myself and how to be independent. And sort of above else, like, you just got to trust people. Like, you just have to have faith that there are good people in the world that'll help you out, that won't, you know, rob you blind because you're giving them your passport and credit card. And, you know, there's bad people in the world too, but you know, you can get through a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
just
that
by
sounds
trusting
like
people.
Such a trial by fire in terms of travel. Like what's going to happen to you ever again?
It's sort of interesting
right
now. Yeah,
You'll just be like, I can just hide behind this garbage can.
Dude.
We'll be fine. Both of us, everybody behind the garbage can. This will work out perfectly.
It's interesting now traveling with Team Canada and having these like young, because a lot of the people who are good in Canada right now are pretty young. So a lot of the people on our team are 16, 17, 18 years old and get stressed out when they're traveling, when they're flying. And, you know, what if we miss our flight? I'm like, man, book another flight. Like, it's going to be okay. So, I mean, in terms of traveling, we're good now. I've sort of covered all of the crisis bases.
Oh my God, she's so wise.
Yeah, well.
How old are you now?
3 months. I am 23.
23. So this was only a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you been on a proper climbing trip since then? Besides traveling for comps?
Not really. No, it's been comp mode since then.
You still got a little PTSD.
I do. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes, yeah, for sure.
Just go to Europe.
Be climbing on a route, and I'll be like, "Where is the rock? Where is the brick?" Somebody's gonna start throwing that at me.
Brick at you. Well, that's cool though.
Yeah.
I mean, like grace under pressure kind of thing. It's gotta help you out. Like at least no one's throwing a brick at me right now.
No, definitely. There's definitely. I mean, it's like, you know, it's the epitome of type 2 fun, I would say. Like, it was horrible while it was happening, and then I got home and I was like, you'll never believe these stories.
I mean, that was like that was like 10 minutes of the best podcasting I've done in a long time.
Man.
So that was a good story.
Worth it. Who knew it would be worth it this many years later?
Okay, so we land back here in Canada, and that's when you reset and you're like, all right, I'm going to back to school.
Yes.
And was that, back to my original question, was that a conscious decision to go to the city and check out the West Coast?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of always the plan. Like, and then I realized, I mean, living in Vancouver is super expensive. It's sort of a pretty well-known fact. And so I was sort of similar to what you were saying. If I was going to be able to live there at any point, it would probably be when I was in school and I could do it cheaply and live in a basement. And so I decided to apply to the University of British Columbia and got in and so been there ever since. And just graduated in April with a kinesiology degree. Okay. Yeah.
So in the meantime, you sort of double down on competition climbing. Mm-hmm. And
so my first year in Vancouver, I was sort of just climbing for fun on my own, trying to get back into the groove. It was a little bit tough when I got back from that trip to like get psyched on climbing again. I was sort of back into work mode and was happy to just be back in my regular groove. And
well, you probably lost a lot of weight in Thailand.
I did. I really did.
You're just like, I am so ripped right now.
Came back looking like a POW. It was insane.
Oh, another dog visitor. There's dog visitors everywhere.
So I went to school in September, and I think I was there for a year when I was sort of just doing my own thing and just climbing at the gym a bunch, climbing a lot, but not really in a structured way, and slowly got back into competition climbing and competed at my first open bouldering nationals that year. And then the second year I was there, I started working with the Hive climbing gym in Vancouver. And I got coaching staff, which was really nice. So since then, I've been working with Christian Core from Italy. He lives in Squamish now. He's the guy that did Joya. And he also was world champion, World Cup winner in his own right when he was in his competition phase. So it's been really cool to work with him because he brings so much knowledge to the table about both rock and competition climbing. And I feel very lucky to know him and to get to work with him. And then I also am working with Jeff Thompson, whose background is in gymnastics mostly, but he's really knowledgeable about high performance sport. So they make a really good team. Christian sort of brings the really hardcore rock climbing knowledge, and Jeff brings the periodized training cycles and overall body awareness and competitive sport component to it. And yeah, I feel very fortunate to have found those two as a coaching staff, and I've been working with them for 3 years now. So it's been good. It was a good one of the best decisions I've made in a long time, I think, moving to Vancouver. I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, it's been great.
Talking about your that coaching situation, I mean, so much I think has changed in competition climbing and how athletes are approaching it, even since you started.
Yeah,
I think a big sea change in approaching it, I think just way more athletically.
Absolutely. Like I don't know about everybody on the World Cup circuit, but I'd say there's a good amount of people who have like personal trainers now, which I do too. I've been working with this guy named Peter out of Vancouver, and it's been really great for me. But, you got to be overall body fitness as well as climbing strong. And I think it's sort of been cool for me, Jeff and Christian. We've been learning. It's been a learning curve for us all together as a team, which has been cool. When Christian was competing in climbing, it was like, how small of holds can you hold on a 45-degree overhang? And then if you can hold the smallest ones, you win. Like, there's all these pictures of him winning World Cups on just like the most heinous crimps.
Right.
And I mean, there's still crimps in the World Cup. Don't get me wrong. There's still hard climbing, but it's definitely different now. And so it's been a bit of a learning curve adapting and sort of working towards more full body awareness and climbing with, it's almost like climbing and training with intention. Like when you do an exercise, when you do a move, you think about how this could be replicated in a competition boulder. Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? And I find it, the best part has been putting more purpose into training as it pertains to competition climbing.
Right. So when we're looking at not just climbing, not just as a sport, but I think this probably applies to all sort of sports psychology or even philosophy. Do you spend any time talking about, discussing, or even thinking about what are sort of the intangible, I don't know, I want to say almost like magic ingredients? Because, you take two physical specimens, two people, both women, both relatively strong, both on paper seem to be the same person. Do you ever talk about like, well, what is the thing that kicks that champion up the
Yeah. Well,
because it's like the training, I feel like the physical training anyway, obviously gets you so far.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me personally, I think the mental component of competing is still the most lacking component for me. Like so the short answer is yes, we do talk about it a lot because it is a weakness of mine for sure. Just because it's hard. One of the ways you can look at the statement you just said is that there are a ton of people that have been doing exactly the same thing as me, are as motivated, are as focused, and are as fit and capable. And it's easy to question, like, why do I stand out? Why do I deserve to do better than these people? What makes me different? So it's sort of hard to maintain that confidence going into a competition. And I honestly don't have the answer. I don't know. I think you sort of hit the nail on the head with the word intangible there. What I will say is, there's somebody like Janja Garnbret's been absolutely lighting up the World Cup circuit this year. She's won every single bouldering competition so far. And I mean, honestly, I think unless she injures herself or gets sick from the first 4, it looks like she will not lose. Like, she is so above and beyond what other people are doing right now. Like, it is unbelievable. And it's not something you can put your finger on. I mean, you watch these other girls who are the strongest in the world on these boulders, and they make them, they're falling, they can't get to the zone, they can get just past zone, and she will come out and flash it and be done in 20 seconds. And it just looks easy. Like, I don't know if it's like she's just a mutant genetic anomaly. I mean, probably partially, but I don't know. It's definitely interesting. And I don't really know if I have an answer for you.
Well, there isn't one, or else we'd both be millionaires.
I mean, yeah. Well, let's work on that. Yeah.
It's not like a magic elixir, or just like, do this, let your mind be free. I mean, some cliche crap like that. But it's just, I'm not terribly competitive person. You started by saying that, and it's super important. But at the same time, I'm an observer, and I watch, and I wonder, and I wonder about the outdoor climbing too, because there's these people who just rise above, and you're like, gosh, yeah, they're really strong, but so's that dude, and so's that dude, or so's that girl, and so's that girl.
It seems like there's this
kind of fascinating to
yeah,
just sort of...
yeah. I mean, it seems like with all these high performance athletes, it seems like there's this inherent internal turmoil, I guess, which is sort of you're in competition with yourself. So you're always thinking, how could I be better? How could I be better? Why aren't I good at this? Why aren't I good at this? And it can get pretty dark sometimes when you're in this like training cycle and you're always inside and you're just grinding day after day and you haven't seen the results and you're getting injured and you're feeling like your shoulder's hurting and everything's going not your way. And it's really hard to push through. And I think some of the most successful people are able to use that to their advantage in training and in their training cycles and use that to drive them, but then are able to turn it off when they're in competitions and be able to step onto that mat and look at a boulder and be like, I am the best. I can absolutely do this boulder. I'm going to get to the top, do whatever it takes. I'm strong enough, smart enough. I've trained for this. It's going to happen right now, and can just flip that switch like that. It seems like that is key. And I am nowhere near good at that yet, but that's what I'm working towards.
So you're saying these, like, it can get dark and blah, blah, blah. From experience,
absolutely,
clearly,
yeah.
Because the way you said it, and right now we're sitting here, we're having a good time, we're laughing, we're chatting. So I don't know you, so I don't know what that looks like in you. But what at this point, what do you turn to when that's going on? I mean, do you have your own personal, at least a few building blocks put in place to say, oh, A, how do you recognize it in yourself, and B, do you have some places to turn to? And
yeah, I mean, I think anybody who works where I train at the Hive in Vancouver will attest that they've seen it before, where you sort of get into this dark downward spiral of uncertainty, I would say. You can't do a boulder and you start thinking, I can't do this boulder. What boulder won't I be able to do at the World Cup? If I can't do this, it's not going to go well. Or you're standing and saying so-and-so would be able to do this. Why can't I do it? They're going to beat me. And then it just this internal dialogue just slowly swirls into, and I usually leave the gym. I usually for not forever, but I usually have to leave for 10 or 15 minutes and walk around outside and reassess and put things back into perspective and say, there's no trash cans around. You're not hiding in Vietnam.
Right.
Life's pretty good. You're not going to get shot. You can keep training. And then you walk back in the gym and are able to reset. But I don't know.
Does it ever get bigger than that? Like it affects your other parts of your life?
I don't know if I've consciously thought about that before. I probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's it's almost hard when you're training so much to have other facets of life.
Right.
It's sort of one of the reasons I studied sport in university, and it's one of the reasons that athletes struggle when they retire from sport is because it's your entire identity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. If there's any athletes out there listening and you have a quick fix to...
Yeah, like I said, we'd be...
Please let us know.
Yeah, we'd have a $1 million coaching program.
We'll steal the idea from you.
Yeah. So right now, is the Olympics in your life?
Yes and no.
Okay.
2020, no.
Okay.
For sure. I got injured at the beginning of this year at our Open Nationals, so I had to pull out of finals in the middle of it. I twisted my ankle and my knee, and everybody thought it sort of just wasn't worth it to risk making it worse. And then after I injured my ankle and my knee, I sort of started only doing upper body training, and then I injured my shoulder because I was only doing upper body training.
Okay.
And then I decided
obsessiveness.
I only decided to only do a lot of hangboarding and only use small holds, and then I injured my finger.
Right. Okay.
So at that point, I was like, all right, we should probably take a little bit of a rest. But I did not have time, so I went to the World Cups instead, and in China, and here we are.
Okay.
Yeah. But those injuries, it made it really hard to train for speed climbing in particular. Mm-hmm. And I was already behind in it. I haven't been doing it like the U.S. guys have. So I would have been behind anyway, and it just didn't really make sense anymore, and was trying to be realistic in terms of the season. But, it's on the docket for 2024, and they've proposed to separate speed climbing out from bouldering and lead. So
after all the bitching.
Yeah. You never know at that point. Yeah.
Sometimes bitching works. Yeah. So that was, we don't really need to get into it, but obviously that was a big kind of like, wait, what? When they said, okay, everybody has to speed climb. Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it sucks that boulders and lead climbers have to speed climb for sure. But I actually think it's the most unfortunate for actual speed climbers. Mm-hmm. The boulders and lead climbers are better at the other two because they're better at 2/3 of it, and they're getting fast at speed climbing too. But I would assume that those 20 athletes that are going to be at the Olympics will not be the fastest ones. So,
no, I mean, the speed climbers are so specialized that they can't compete in the other ones. Yeah. So these guys like the Iranian guy.
Yeah. Reza.
Reza. Yeah. Like, I mean, he's clearly the best speed climber by a mile. And he's out of luck.
No, I mean, I'm excited for them for 2024 to have their own thing, because say what you want about speed climbing, like those guys are super impressive.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is unbelievable the things they're doing. And I think it's unfortunate that won't get showcased at 2020 in the way that it should be, but hopefully it will be in 2024.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Like, I mean, I think the climbers at 2020 will probably be at least a couple seconds slower.
For sure.
Than the fastest guys.
Because they're also, I mean, you can kind of, like I said, it's all when that happened, when it was announced like that, then it all became strategy. And I think for the top bouldering and lead climbing people, they are just looking at, well, how fast, do I have to get to compete with these other people that I'm always competing with anyway? Yeah. And so they're not thinking like, I need to be the fastest in the world, which when you think about sport in general, that's a real shame.
Absolutely.
That you've got these people who are strategizing how they don't actually have to be as fast as they really need
Absolutely.
to be.
And I mean, people look at results now of Speed World Cups, and they look at the results, but what they're looking at more is who was the top combined person who does other. So they look at they go through the top 12 or 15 or 20 or whatever it is, and then you start looking at who are the boulderers, who are the lead climbers, who's best ranked in those people. And the top of the list doesn't get neglected, I would say. People still appreciate when people are fast, but more and more of the attention is drawn towards the combined people and how well they're doing in speed.
Yeah, because and hopefully the consideration for 2024, I just made a joke, it was because everybody was complaining, but that's just in our purview because we're here in the U.S. and Canada and Europe where
absolutely
it's thing. So hopefully the decision to switch them to individuals is based on that. I mean, maybe they now have a realization of like, wow, we just kind of blew it for this group of people.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So maybe they're also bitching in their own way.
Yeah. I mean, I do think speed climbers in the competition climbing world are a little bit of oddballs for sure, but it is like I said, I think it is a waste that they won't be seen.
They're not.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, for sure.
It's just kind of that ethnocentric perspective of how we approach things here.
Absolutely, it's easy to get that skewed for sure living in North America.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is your sort of path then of the next couple of years in terms of what your climbing looks like and where you're headed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still super psyched on competitions. I like both bouldering and lead competitions in their own rights. I think they balance each other out pretty nicely too. The training's different, keeps things interesting. So mostly just psyched to try to see how well I can do in those bouldering and lead competitions and get outside more. I mean, I live super close to Squamish and I do not get up there as much as I should just because I'm in the gym all the time. But I was able to get out there for a couple days bouldering a couple months ago and had some really good days. So I think that's promising for what can be accomplished in the future. And so hopefully doing a little bit of it all.
I mean, do you have this is almost rhetorical because I know the answer. Like anytime you're splitting your time, does it feel like, well, I'm cheating myself because I really should be specifically training in the gym as you go outside? Do you have any of those problems?
I mean, I do for sure. And I think I almost have them too much. Like I said, I seriously do think I have an obsessive, I mean, again, it's worked well for me because I'm still in it, but it is an obsessive.
Obsessive.
Exactly.
You're not just like turning doorknobs and walking 12 steps every time you walk out the door. But there are World Cup athletes who climb outside all the time and then go and tear it up in competitions too. And I just have a hard time in my brain being able to justify that. I don't know. I feel like especially because I spend most of my time and money on competitions, I want to do everything I possibly can to be in the best shape I can be for those events. And unfortunately, a lot of times that means you just got to be single-minded in the gym.
Well, I mean, you just said, there are these these athletes that, go climb outside and then tear it up in competitions. I almost feel like if things keep going and the Olympics get sort of be an even bigger deal than it is, you'll say in 10 years, people will say there used to be athletes that would go outside and still tear up.
I agree with you 100%.
We've lost for the next 2 years any sort of thrill of watching Adam Ondra climb outside. He's basically, I'm going to do this for 2 years. So, I mean, yeah, it's still working, but it's almost like those people are a bit grandfathered in at this point.
Oh yeah,
I feel
for sure.
like, so.
Yeah, for sure. And even Adam, he did do as well as people were expecting him to do last weekend in China. It's like a testament to the depth of the field, and
yeah, for sure.
You'd have an off day for 1 second, and it's devastating results wise.
What's Yanya? That's her name, right? Her training probably looks the same, just indoors at this point. I mean, she's a good outdoor climber, I believe. I've seen.
I mean, she sent some hard stuff. I don't know it off the top of my head. I would probably misquote her, but I don't think she's tried anything for more than a few days. Like, it's not like she has hard ascents that she's worked on. Like, she just rolled up to the crag and was like, I'll just do 9A. It's cool. And then just went back to her training. So, and I think it's interesting people talk about her in the sense that, she hasn't sent the hardest thing, so she's not the best female climber. But I have no doubt that if Yanya decides to retire from competition climbing and actually dedicate her time to the rock, it's going to be unreasonable what she is going to start doing.
No, it's just like, she's the potential. You just haven't realized it yet.
Exactly.
She's not 50 years old and looking back on
exactly. Yeah.
And she's going to retire from the competition someday because you have to.
Absolutely.
Eventually.
Yeah. So look out. Outdoor world when that happens.
I know. It's all silly, just conjecture at some point. She's obviously, she's clearly an incredibly talented climber.
Yeah.
And whatever attitude she brings to just
I feel very
just do it in the crag.
I feel very lucky to even be competing in the same era as her because it truly is unbelievable. Like, I was talking to Charlie Boscow, the commentator for the IFSC, the other week, and he was saying he feels like some people are getting sick of her winning, and both of us agreed that neither of us are. Like, I'm excited to see how far she can go. Like, how many competitions in a row is she going to win? How dominant is she actually going to become? Because so far this season, it's been unreal.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think other people get down about that?
Probably. Yeah.
Just getting your ass kicked.
Yeah.
Comp after comp, it can be a bit demoralizing.
I mean, for someone like Akio Noguchi from Japan, like, she's coming second every time.
Right.
Probably is not that fun for her.
Yeah, but again, that's just the nature of individual sport. I mean, every sport has these eras where you're behind Usain Bolt. Yeah. And that's just, you got hosed.
Bummer, dude.
Or whoever it happens to be. It's like, you got hosed that was also the peak of your time.
Yeah. You're fighting for second. Sorry.
So, I don't know. I mean, not to count out, what was her name?
Akio.
Yeah, not to count her out, but it just happens sometimes, So right now, this is a career. And in terms of a career path that's working for you at the moment?
I mean, more or less, yeah. I mean, I will be working. I'm working for Judo BC this summer, doing some sport admin stuff.
Okay.
To be able to supplement being able to travel, but you got to sort of do things on the side. But it is, climbing is the main gig right now for sure. And it feels awesome to be here. And I mean, this summit, even we're here for the Black Diamond Athlete Summit, and the crew of people is like unreal. Like, it's like it is so humbling to be here and to hear these guys talk about gear and climbing and whatever trips they're doing. And, the skiers, the runners, people I've looked up to for forever. Like, to be like up here honestly, it's insane. And we heard from a couple of the founders of BD yesterday that gave us a bit of a talk about the history of the company, and they sort of passed it on and said, this generation of innovation now passes on to you guys. And it was like, whoa, like, to me, like, it's a bit of a shocker there, but no, it's exciting. And I feel very lucky and honored to be here for sure.
All right, folks, thanks for listening. And thanks to Allison for kicking it in the parking lot and getting this thing done before she ran off to kick some ass up in Canada. Yeah, and I'm off to OR next week, Outdoor Retailer Trade Show in Denver, Colorado. Got a bunch of stuff lined up, a bunch of interviews lined up that you guys will get to hear in the coming months. Some cool stuff, some kind of surprising stuff. But I got to say, I miss the trade show being in Salt Lake City. You guys probably aren't privy to as much of the politics of all that as we are in the quote-unquote industry, but they moved it from Salt Lake to Denver in protest of Utah's treatment of public lands, or non-treatment. We're basically trying to get rid of them. And but I miss Salt Lake. The very roots of this podcast are definitely tied to luring unsuspecting climbers to crummy hotel rooms in Salt Lake City. But in Denver, there are no crummy hotels nearby. So I got to get a nice hotel, which doesn't kill me, but certainly digs into the funds here at the Enormocast. A bit of the mystique is gone as well, luring sweet little Paige Clausen to a dingy hotel room. Just has sort of a certain vibe to it. And the other thing that's coming up in a couple weeks is, of course, the International Climbers Festival up in Lander. Definitely heading up there, and definitely looking forward to seeing some of you folks up there. So please, if you see myself and or the entourage, come up and say hi. All right, folks, I'm going climbing this weekend. I'm going to be checking my knot, but I was just chatting with Malcolm Daly, who's going to come on the show soon, and he pointed out that, people's tie-in knot coming undone is not nearly as common of an accident as lowering somebody off the rope because there's not a knot in the end of the rope, or viciously, the most horrible accident of all perhaps is rappelling off the end of your rope. So when you're checking your knots, put those on the list. Your sport climbing, doesn't matter. You're climbing in the gym, doesn't matter. Put the knot in the end of the rope. Can't hurt. It can't hurt. And of course, put knots on the end of your rappel lines as well. All right, just be safe out there, please. Check your knots, plural.
Edmonton is a bustling metropolis and a center for festivals, culture, and business. It's known for its friendly people and being the gateway to the north for the oil and mining industries. Set along the North Saskatchewan River and its beautiful river valleys, you'll find Alberta's capital city.
The teachers told me that's where it's at.